Hello, and welcome to OCD Behind the Scenes, a podcast brought to you by OCDMidwest.org. I'm your host, Marty McGovern, a practicing psychotherapist at Wellington Counseling Group in the Chicagoland area, and today we are speaking with Dr. Beth McCreary, a clinical psychologist and the owner of Anxiety and Behavioral Health Services in Worthington, Ohio, a private practice specializing in evidence-based interventions for adults with anxiety and OCD for over 20 years. In today's conversation, we discuss the power of OCD support groups. Beth started the Goals OCD support group in Columbus, Ohio over 12 years ago and shares her perspectives as a facilitator as well as stories from participants throughout our discussion. Learn more about Beth and her work by going to abhs.com. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Beth McCreary. Beth, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you very much, Marty. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Great to have you. As we kick things off, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your background and how you first became interested in therapy and OCD.
Oh, sure. Well, I am a clinical psychologist. I'm board certified in behavioral and cognitive psychology, particularly. And golly, it's been a long time, I think, becoming interested in psychology. Both my parents majored in psychology. We had lots of psychological discussions in my household. I can say I also have my own history of being the client. Throughout my lifetime in various ways. I have a diagnosis of recurrent major depression and a good deal of anxiety myself, not necessarily OCD specifically, but a lot of anxiety. And so I went through a lot of treatment myself, and it was life-changing and life-saving for me, and always taught me more about people and life and emotions, and I was just interested in that and wanted to sort of pay it forward. So did my doctorate in clinical psychology at Ohio State University, and then did some postdoctoral work there as well in the Anxiety and Stress Disorders Clinic. And in 2003, started a private practice with a colleague, Dr. Joe DeCola, called Anxiety and Behavioral Health Services, or ABHS. And we specialized in treating all kinds of anxiety-related conditions. In the beginning, it was interesting. We had mostly, for whatever reason, a lot of panic and agoraphobia, specific phobias, social anxiety and worry. OCD kind of gradually trickled in to that. And that became more of a focus for us sort of gradually over time as we were realizing there really aren't a lot of people who treat OCD at all. So this is back in the early 2000s. I mean, there was a real dearth of services for folks. And I think out of that, I went and got some specialty training. I had good training to begin with, but then I got some specialty training from IOCDF with their Behavior Therapy Training Institute, the BTI, so that was helpful. And then, of course, what we're going to talk mostly about today is the support group. And after I started that, I just started gaining experience from lots of people who were telling me about OCD, and it sort of developed from there naturally. I would say at this point in the private practice, probably 2/3 of our clientele have OCD and seek us out for treatment of OCD. We now have 5 clinicians in the practice. Dr. DeCola and I are still here, and we have 3 LPCCs working within the practice who are all terrific, and everyone is capable of treating OCD with exposure and response prevention, as well as treating other anxiety conditions.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, as well as your personal experiences, because I think a lot of us get into the field,
Yep.
not just because of an interest in psychology, but also personal experience with the things that we're working on.
Sure.
As you started getting more training and things began shifting from the panic to the OCD, were there any misconceptions that you came across, or anything that you currently think are misconceptions that people have about OCD that you find to be interesting or would want to dispel?
Good question. There's I guess the obvious one that laypersons in the general public think, of course, that OCD is all about washing your hands too much, or things that are stereotypes about it. And as we know in treating OCD, there are so many different themes. Everybody who has OCD is slightly different in what's contributed to it, what their particular thoughts are, what the obsessions are. And it's not, as many people in the support group have said over and over again, it's not funny. It's not a funny little thing that happens that, oh, I'm so OCD. It can be, as you well know, really debilitating, highly distressing, and interfering in quality of living. So I think the general public doesn't really understand that, although I hope that we are starting to evolve that and educate people better so they have a better understanding of that. I guess that would be the primary thing. Not all OCD is necessarily anxiety driven. Some of it, for example, might be disgust related, and people might not feel quite as anxious, more kind of disturbed or grossed out by things, which we could see under the umbrella of anxiety, but it might not always feel that way to them. And so, as you know, the OCD is to be classified with the anxiety conditions, and was, with the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5th edition, split into its own category, which I think has been useful for research purposes and for understanding its breadth and depth and how complicated it is. At the heart of it, I tend to think of it still as primarily anxiety driven.
I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, I think that was one of the big things when I first came across my studies in OCD of just like, oh wow, this goes so much deeper and it covers so many more topics than one might have thought. One of the things that I thought was so interesting is that not all treatments are helpful for OCD as well. And things that maybe I early on in my studies thought were like panacea kind of things, when I was unknowledgeable. I started to learn maybe weren't as effective when it comes to OCD. And I'm curious, what, in all the work that you've done over the years, and we're going to talk about group stuff today, but what are some of the things that you find to be the most helpful when trying to treat OCD?
Exposure with response prevention certainly is, as you know, the gold standard and not a panacea. So it's very helpful. People definitely benefit from it, but I think the going understanding is maybe it's around 2/3 of the people who really benefit from it significantly. And so what do we do with the other 1/3? So trying to find ways that we can enhance the interventions and offer more to people, thinking in terms of values. What what do I want to accomplish in life? How do I want to live? What do I want to live by? I want to be connected to my children and present with them. There are places that I would like to go. There are relationships I would like to be in. What do I value? What motivates me? So thinking from an acceptance and commitment therapy kind of standpoint, ACT can be really helpful as an adjunct to exposure with response prevention. In the group, we talk about that often. What do you value? And even while you're suffering from the OCD, what do you want to be doing while you're suffering so that all is not lost? And that is helpful. There is no substitute for good self-compassion. Mindfulness and self-compassion, I think, are super helpful. So I'll do this on the front end, usually before starting exposure work with people. Doing a little bit of mindfulness work, learning to observe without judgment, starting perhaps with sensory mindfulness and their surroundings. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? And then moving to what do you feel internally? What thoughts are you having? What body sensations are you having? Becoming the observer of the internal experience as well in a way that is non-judging. And I might spend more or less time doing that depending on the person's presentation, like how judging they are of themselves at the outset. Because if we start doing exposure work and someone is self-criticizing, self-degrading internally, I'm so anxious, I'm so weak and defective and problemed because, I mean, look at me, I can barely do this exposure. I shouldn't feel like this. This just goes to show how weak and defective I am. Well, that exposure is not going to be very effective if that's the internal monologue and the way the person sees themselves. So trying to facilitate normalization and compassion for one's own emotion. Feelings, distress, emotional distress doesn't make you weak, doesn't make you defective. We all have it, and it's normal, and we need it at times. It serves a purpose, it provides information to us. So this idea of giving some education and promoting self-compassion, I think, is really helpful in all forms of therapy, but definitely before I start doing exposure work with somebody.
Absolutely. And one of the things that really stands out to me as you talk about that is how isolating OCD can be for folks and how it can feel like you're the only one with this problem and kind of almost become more distant due to it from other people in your life, which plays into the group work that you do. And I'd be curious what your thoughts are on that isolation piece and how OCD might affect people's ability to connect and relate and participate in group activities.
That's a great point. It's really tough to join a group. We often get people into the group, and I'll just mention currently we're running a group primarily virtually, twice per month online. Once per quarter, we do it in person. So those things are a little bit different too. But it's frequent that people, when they come to the group, will say, it took me months, or recently we had somebody who said, it took me 2 years. I've known about this group for 2 years. It was so hard to get started. It took me that long to come. And everybody in the group clapped. But the exposure that this person did just to get into the group, and that is not uncommon. It's tough. Once people come, at least to our group experience has been they are greatly comforted by the people they see there and the way that they speak with respect and encouragement to one another, and the way that they're able to open up. Usually people are greatly comforted by that and have the courage then to say something like, yes, I would like to introduce myself. And even if they're in tears or they're shaking, they're saying, and it took me months to get here. I'm glad that I'm here. And it's been worthwhile. And I just love everything that everybody else in the group has said tonight. So they feel welcomed and understood pretty quickly. Usually that's been what I've observed.
Yeah, that's incredible. And as you got into doing group work, what was that transition like for you to go from the individual work to the group work? And what were some of the things that you learned along the way?
Oh, that's a great question. So when I started the group, it was in January of 2013, and I was so nervous, the first group. I don't know how this is going to go. Am I going to be able to bring something to it? Are people going to be a good fit for each other? How many people are going to show up? It was really scary. And it went okay. I think we had 8 or 9 people, the very first group, and it sort of grew from there. It's tough as an individual therapist. If someone says something to you in session, you can kind of follow up on that for an extended period of time. If you have 10 or later 15 or 20 people in a group, everybody's only got a short period of time that they can speak if you want to make sure that everybody has time. So trying to keep it focused can be a real challenge. Early on in the group, it sort of evolved isn't exactly the word that I mean. It sort of shifted, and we had a number of people with some social anxiety and panic in it, and they'd start talking about this and more, and I didn't necessarily cut them off, and because other people were engaged and said, oh yes, me too, and I don't know, maybe had 10 people coming regularly. And then I noticed that what would happen is somebody new would come who had OCD, and then we got half the group members talking about their panic attacks and their social anxiety, not talking about OCD. We get to the OCD too, but it wasn't really the focus as much as I would have intended. So there came up, and then those people who would come in new, I wouldn't see them again. And it occurred to me, I got to tighten it up. And so this was years ago, maybe a year and a half or 2 years into having started it. And I said, we need to talk about OCD. And these other things can be important too. Obviously, they are, and you can mention them, but that's not what we're. And I started to have to actually cut people off sometimes, which was frustrating for them in the beginning, but it saved the group. We had gone from 12 to 15 people in a group session back down to 6 or 7. And that was happening. And then we grew again. And it was a really important lesson. So being able to stop someone from what they're saying is hard. But having that, this is what we're here to do. And so now we say that at the outset. Many things are important, and we need to make time for everyone to be able to talk. And they're here for the OCD, though, so we're going to really focus tonight on the OCD. That was a big thing I learned.
That's such an important thing, in especially when thinking about, just getting together with people that you know versus joining a focused group that's trying to work through OCD issues together. And so having that moderator there to kind of keep things on track is always a helpful thing. So tell me a little bit about your approach to groups and the type of work you do in these settings.
Well, with this group, it's a support group. And I started it, I had wanted actually to start a therapy group within my private practice. That was so complicated because of insurance related issues and logistics, and the amount of work that it was going to be to do that, and the complications weren't going to be worth it financially in the practice. And I thought, well, this is really important though. And I do genuinely find volunteer work and service to be an important part of my personal value system. So that, well, I'll show those insurance companies. I'll just start a support group and do it for free.
Nice.
And on the upside for me, no charts, no progress notes. You got to go. So that part was great, and it has just been so rewarding. But to start it, I didn't know exactly. Do you do like a Yalom style group, and you just go around the room and say who wants to talk tonight and how much time do we need? And okay, then let's go around today. So I did a little research and found Dr. Jonathan Grayson's goals protocol online. You might be familiar with Dr. Grayson, who wrote, amongst other things, Freedom from OCD. He was in Philadelphia at the time, and he partnered with a woman by the name of Gail Frankel, who had been a client, actually, of Edna Foa's. And Jonathan Grayson also knew Edna Foa. And Dr. Grayson and Gail Frankel partnered to start the first one of these groups, which in the beginning, it was 1981. They started it to help people from their private practices prevent relapse. And then they grew it from there, and they really worked with people, and they developed this protocol. They learned, it says this in the protocol that I read, over years, that it took 3 distinct segments of the group in order to make the group successful. An opening discussion at the beginning surrounding a topic that they would choose having to do with OCD. Then the focused goals setting portion, like concretely, what have you been working on since the last session you attended to now? And what would you like to work on between now and the next session? Next therapy groups or support group, session. And most of those goals for them had to do with exposure and response prevention, and that's still true for us. So there's the goal setting portion. And then there was the social time at the end, where you can just connect with other people. And they learned through years of experience that all 3 of those things were necessary to make a group productive and to make it long lasting. That group still exists today in Philadelphia, like over 40 years later. It has evolved now to have this protocol, which it didn't right in the beginning until they learned all of these things. So if you look online with IOCDF, for example, to see this Philadelphia based group, it is now it has the goals format, and it will say that it has been running continuously for over 20 years, which I think is pretty amazing. So that's the
That is amazing. That's amazing. And with this structure, it's so interesting how there's that opening discussion, the goals section, and then the social time at the end. And that really stands out to me because, a lot of times when people come to therapy, they're just like, just goals, 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 And I'm curious, what have you seen that social time really add to people's recovery?
Oh my goodness, so much. And it's tricky now because during the pandemic, we went from in person to online. Um, so we've lost, in our typical group, we lost that free social time now. When we used to do it in person all the time, I would stop the group at 8 p.m. and from 8 to 8:30, that half hour is mix and mingle. Some people would just leave, they're ready to go. Other people, I had to kick them out the door at 8:40 because I want to go home. They're so connecting with each other. And I would sit at the back of the room by myself and say, hey, if you've got particular questions about OCD or something, you want to come see me. Otherwise, I just take myself out of the equation. And people formed friendships from this that I know they have still today that have lasted like a decade or more. Some of the people who came to the group in the beginning and were involved in it when it was in person, they started a separate group. One of the group members started a WhatsApp during the pandemic so that they could continue to communicate with each other. And they invited anybody who starts in the group well, we've been doing it virtually, can still join the WhatsApp. They get together in the summertime and go hiking in the metro parks. There is, and the 1 million steps for OCD walks annually. This will be our 9th annual. So 4 years into the support group, we talked as a group and decided let's do one of those. And so that personal connection, and you'll hear that when I tell some of the stories that people shared, that personal connection has been invaluable. So that's why we started as soon as we could doing at least one quarterly in-person meeting so people can have that connection. Meeting with people who understand what your experience is. There's no substitute for that. Feeling less alone, less isolated. People get it in a way that even the therapist cannot unless they've had the same experience.
I love the way you said that. People get it. That's so true. And in terms of the discussions and the goals, what are some of the topics or the exposures that you see are fairly common that people are trying to accomplish?
It varies greatly. So we strongly encourage exposure and or response prevention goals. And we say that at the beginning of the goals section of the group, and we with a brief definition of what those things mean, because some people are brand new to this process. Other people have been in therapy for a long time and have been come to the group for years, and they know what this is already. But there are people who are new, and the folks who've been there for a long time like to support those people too. So sometimes our goals might not be ERP. They might be something like self-monitoring in the beginning. Write down how many times this thought is occurring to you or how many times you're doing this ritual. Kind of just orient yourself to the impact that this is having on your life. That could be something. Sometimes the goal is a mindfulness and self-compassion related goal because, as I said earlier, if we don't do some of that in the beginning and people are very judging of themselves, it's very hard to go into an exposure process. So there are those goals. In terms of the actual exposures, when people choose those, it could be something very small. Trying to think of something that would be a smaller one, but something that they're going to touch and then eat something. And I should small meaning the behavior, because to the person experiencing this, it's never small. It could be life changing. To step out of the house without the mask on after COVID. Okay, I'll go for a walk outside without the mask. I'll go to the grocery store without the mask. That was hard for many of us coming out of COVID, and for someone with contamination-related OCD, of course, terrifying. So there are goals like that, and then there are goals for travel. I'm going to get on an airplane and go to this place and see these people, and I haven't done that for years. So some goals are really big. They vary greatly across people, and the really lovely thing is that everybody in the support group supports everyone else's goals. They know everybody's at a different place in the journey, and it doesn't matter the size of your goal or how it might be really terrifying, or it might be, okay, I'm just going to try something little and see how it goes. Everybody understands that it's a process.
That's incredible. And you said that you recently invited the group members to share some stories, and I was wondering if you could read some of those responses for us at this time.
Oh, I would love to. Thank you. Yeah. So I've got something here. Since these are their words, and I have done a little bit of editing just for time, but everyone in one way or another, everybody who responded commented on the power of connecting with other people who could truly understand their experiences. So, for example, one person said, the members of the group helped me to feel like I wasn't alone and helpless. It might sound simple, being around like-minded people sounds so obvious, but OCD is isolating and you just can't beat it by yourself. That really resonated with what you said earlier about isolation and the importance of connection. And another person said, the companionship of others experiencing my struggles was invaluable. Everybody said something to that effect. One person said, this related to, I thought, the overall idea of clarification and courage to seek professional help. So this person says, the OCD Goals Support Group has been a monumental catalyst in my OCD journey and recovery. My partner actually found the support group online because OCD was negatively impacting both of our lives. I hadn't been evaluated or diagnosed with OCD yet, but I had some suspicions that I had OCD. Attending the support group gave me the strength, encouragement, and inspiration to seek out professional help. Hearing others talk about finding a therapist, getting a diagnosis of OCD, working through treatment plans, it was eye-opening. The group inspired me to learn more about OCD and ERP. I had never talked to anyone living with OCD. Other members of the group showed me what was possible by getting professional help. It gave me hope hearing others talk about their wins against OCD. I have found an open, supportive community through OCD Goals, and I would not be where I am today without this wonderful group.
Wow.
So that one mostly focusing on right at the beginning of the journey. I don't know what this is. I'm not sure what to do about it. Oh, that's what this is.
Yeah.
Oh, I can do something about it.
One thing that really stood out to me in that mention is how it impacted not only them but their partner as well. And I think that's also one of the things that maybe isn't thought about or in the stereotype of how it affects the people around those people with OCD. I do some relationship counseling and every once in a while I'll get like suspicions of like, what's that? Maybe there's something deeper there. And I would imagine not only realizing that you have OCD, but there is relationship OCD and there's all these other different things, how that might impact the relationship and how getting into a group and being able to talk to other people who have experienced that would be so helpful to people.
We've used that as the discussion question sometimes. How has OCD impacted your relationships and vice versa?
That's
Uh,
incredible.
yeah, that's the kind of thing we might talk about in the discussion question. Exactly.
Cool. Are there other stories that you
Sure.
wanted to share?
Absolutely. So the point of this one I took from it was legitimizing OCD as an illness and ERP as a treatment. I am not my OCD is in here. So this person says, hearing so many other stories, so much like my own, helped me to accept the legitimacy of OCD as a real disease. Prior to this, I often thought of OCD as a personal character flaw. I suffered from it because I was too weak or lazy to overcome it. To know that educated, professional people faced these issues went a long way in helping me commit to practicing ERP and other treatment activities. I accepted and believed in treatment much more readily. I have OCD. I will always have OCD, but I am not OCD. I treat its symptoms and flare-ups like any other chronic condition, visible or not. For me, doing this is the core of living well with this illness. And I thought that was important as well, not defining oneself by it.
I love that.
So this one the group was the only place where this person did not feel hopelessly irrational. I can confidently say that the goals group is the only reason I was able to overcome the worst phase of OCD I've had in my life. And I have not experienced symptoms for 5 years now. For reference on my specific type, I had intrusive thoughts that I was going to accidentally cause destruction and death. For instance, that I had left the stove on or some other appliance I left plugged in would malfunction and the whole house was going to burn down and I was going to kill all of my pets and maybe my neighbors through the fire. Before I came to the group, it felt like everything in my life was pointing to the fact that I was insane. My significant other, back to the relationship concerns, my significant other at the time was highly frustrated with me because I looped them into the disorder by making them check things for me. I was on the verge of getting fired from my job because I was always late from having to turn around and go back home to check things. And worst of all, my brain just felt like it was being electrocuted with all of the horrible thoughts. Every aspect of my life had run out of patience and I was at a loss. The goals group is the one and only place where I didn't feel like a hopelessly irrational person. The group alone didn't fix the problem because that takes a lot of introspection and even more so exposure activities, which you have to put a lot of time and effort into. But it offered me the space and tools to do it. I wouldn't have known where to start without guidance from the group facilitators, and I wouldn't have been able to clear my head to do so without the members of the group. I really can't stress enough how being around them helped separate the OCD voice from my own.
That's incredible. Yeah. Separating those voices is so key. And something else that really stood out in there is the roping in of the partner. And how complex that relationship is in terms of, when to allow or like the kind of fine line between enabling and helping, right?
Right,
And trying
right.
to understand that as the partner as well as the person with OCD. And it kind of brings up the idea that in a group setting, right, there might be a danger of some enabling, but because of the way it's structured, you're able to, make sure that that doesn't happen and that everyone's working towards supporting the exposures and the growth and things of that sort. What are your thoughts on that enabling piece and how it might show up in someone's life who has OCD?
Well, it does show up in the group. You're
Yeah.
right. At people who are newer to the process in particular will try to offer a workaround for something or provide some additional reassurance. And the people who are more experienced will say, well, you could, but that kind of sounds like reassurance or excessive information giving or this kind of thing. So it definitely shows up. And we often have a conversation around both clinically in private practice and in the group and with significant others and loved ones, where accommodations fit into the cycle of accidentally perpetuating OCD, and how to provide support without being accommodating. In fact, that is one of our discussion questions. How can people support you without accommodating the OCD? Like understanding how hard you're working and commenting on that, or seeing that you're feeling scared and saying, I have faith in you, I know you can do it, promoting the courage, or even asking, is that something that you already know the answer to? But like talking with your partner or your loved ones about how would you like your loved ones to communicate with you? Can they ask you a question like that without, do they have your permission to ask that? So if you ask them a question, can they ask you back, are you looking for reassurance? Are you sure that you want me to provide that? So communicating with your loved ones about how they can gradually pull back from providing accommodations. Did I answer your question? Was that your
Yeah,
question?
yeah, and I love the part you said about courage because I think it takes a lot of courage to even find out this diagnosis and then seek out support in a group and take that next step. A lot of the recovery in the OCD experience is one of bravery and courage, and so Is there anything that you'd recommend as people are maybe contemplating seeking out a group, how they might go about it, what they should be looking out for, or just anything that you'd want them to know as they're trying to seek out support?
Um, for OCD support group, hopefully the people facilitating it are familiar with and promoting exposure with response prevention. They know what that means, and they know what accommodations are and how problematic accommodations can be. So one of the other pieces of feedback that was given by one of the group members was how important it is that we don't come to the group and only talk about how bad we feel. Right? I mean, people can do that too because it feels bad and we want people to be validated and supported, but we try not to get stuck there. The group is about, it's called goals for a reason. That stands for giving OCD sufferers an alternative lifestyle. So
That's so good.
yeah, I didn't make that up, right? That's a protocol. But there's a reason that we're doing this. That there's support. There's also let's move forward and do something. What is the point of the particular support group the person's looking to join? How is it facilitated? Is it a layperson facilitating it, which might be fine if they're familiar with exposure and response prevention and they've got experience with it? That's great. Is it a clinician, and do they know about ERP? Um, so I guess that would be my biggest question.
Yeah. And if you were able to talk and share any insights with clinicians or with people who want to help get involved in a support group or start a support group, is there anything that you would recommend they do?
Read this protocol.
Yeah.
Read Jonathan Grayson's goals protocol, which I found tremendously helpful. We don't stick to it rigidly, but we stick to the format of it, those different sections. And I guess the other thing I would say is try it, even though it's scary. It's an exposure to start a support group. It has been so personally rewarding to see people benefit from this. It feels really good to do it. I mean, I might retire and continue doing this group. At some
Yeah.
point when I'm ready to retire from private practice, I might keep the group because it's been so rewarding to be a part of.
Well, and I love
So
that quote of try it even though it's scary. I think that just applies across the board there. Are there any other stories that you wanted to share that from your group?
yes, I do. I have a couple more here. So this one was about someone who learned about OCD themes. So this person said, before attending the goals group, I had no idea about different themes. I was really surprised to see others in the group nod their heads in very, of course, that's OCD ways when I shared some of the content of my obsessive thoughts. My most painful experience with OCD that I didn't know was OCD during the time I experienced it was thinking I was a pedophile, but I didn't know it. Finding out that others had experienced similar themes and even that exact same thing really helped normalize it for me. I had always felt like some kind of freak and would have to keep these things to myself and maybe a very close friend. Being a part of the group took away a lot of the shame I had around my OCD. I saw these beautiful, caring people sharing stories that were so similar to mine. So I thought, hey, if they're a beautiful person and have this condition, maybe I am too.
That's incredible. And it really does kind of highlight the intensity of some of the intrusive thoughts and the fear that can arise around it if, with such sensitive topics like you shared.
Absolutely. And it's so comforting to people when they realize, oh, I'm not alone with even those taboo thoughts.
Hmm.
Um, this one is a little bit longer, but I think it covers a number of things and makes important points about the format of the group and some of the specific things learned, particularly about mental compulsions, and then providing hope. Being a part of the goals group has definitely empowered me to best handle the OCD symptoms I experience. The group is very accepting and uplifting, and I think no matter where someone is in their journey, just being at a single meeting can have a profound effect on them. It has been tremendously helpful listening to others that have similar struggles and hearing about their victories, even just little everyday victories. I think the group gives people a lot of hope and a sense of community, which is everything. I think the format of the meeting is perfect. The discussion question is really helpful, where you can hear other people's experience and perspectives, which might prompt you to look into a certain resource or change the way you think about something, which could then influence your approach to OCD. The learning aspect of the group is phenomenal. So many things I did not know about OCD, and the knowledge I gained was power. The goals portion is great because that's where the work starts. To me, exposure and response prevention has definitely been the most helpful technique for navigating OCD. I love it because it puts me in the driver's seat. I know that I have the power to face the exposure, not engage in the compulsion, and then sit with the discomfort to retrain my brain. In those moments of discomfort, I just think to myself that this is the magic right here. This is my brain rewiring, and this is the path to healing. I have struggled so much with mental compulsions, and although I am not completely free of them yet, I have made a night and day improvement with them when I compare where I am now with where I used to be. I was reading online about how the best thing you can do is acknowledge the thought as it passes by, not engage with it, and return to the present moment, no matter how hard it is. While this was helpful information, I'm not sure if it would have landed for me the way it did had I not heard the group talk about this. That's what brought it to life for me. Last, I think even if people's progress starts stalling out or they think they have regressed in some way, showing up to the meetings is so beneficial. The things that people learn at the meetings about OCD and other people's experience plant seeds. It may not have an immediate effect on them, but it's something in the back of their mind that might pop up again when they're ready to make a given change. To be a part of a group where people truly understand what you're going through is a rare thing. I have made so much progress with my OCD because of this group that I was able to apply ERP to get out the door and go for a run one day. I wasn't comfortable leaving my property, but I went ahead and did it anyway and absolutely loved it. I hadn't been running for years. Had it not been for this group, I don't know that I would have re-engaged with that activity, which has been so fun and so helpful for my mental health.
It's incredible.
I thought that person just had so much to offer in terms of their experience in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, the things that stand out to me in there is like taking back your power. And one of the big things is when it comes to letting those thoughts pass, how they discuss it being recontextualized in the group setting versus kind of just out in the ether. Because you hear that phrase all over the place in self-help, in meditation, and
Right.
mindfulness, yoga, all sorts of different places. But once it gets recontextualized in terms of OCD and you understand what that means in an OCD setting, it can really change the way that people relate to even that thought and how to utilize it to take back their power.
Absolutely. Yeah, it brought it to life when this group member could see other people applying it and benefiting from it. It was quite moving. Yeah. So I've got one more to share with you, Marty.
Let's hear it.
You still have time for that? Okay. So this person says, this group literally saved my life. I joined the first time from my parents' house before I was even diagnosed, not even sure if I would be alive for the next meeting. Now, OCD still shows up daily, but it is not running my life. I am now married and have completed a master's degree. Shame fuels OCD, and this group fights shame just in its existence. There is so much value in the group being therapist-led, and that the culture of the group is validating the distress of OCD and supporting each other to goals, not just complaining about how devastating OCD is. It's an honor to be a part of this group.
Wow. The idea of fighting shame, because that's a word that's so deep in the OCD world, and we haven't quite dug into that. And I almost wanted to do a whole nother separate conversation about shame. But we may have to come back and do that. But yeah, that's really incredible. And I love the fact that they said that it shows up, but it doesn't rule their life.
Exactly. Thought that was a really powerful statement too.
Beth, if people want to find out more about you and follow your work or even reach out, what are some ways that they can see what you're up to?
You can look at our website. It's www.abhs.com. That stands for Anxiety and Behavioral Health Services. That's probably the easiest way to find more about our private practice. And there's also a link on the resources page. There's a link to the group. And on the homepage, there's a link to the group. So you can find the group that way as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope this was helpful for everyone. I know it was helpful for the folks listening. And I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for sharing.
It's been absolutely my pleasure. Marty, thank you for having me.